dark, solid state and tube timbre, as well as...
It's noticeable to me that when I use a 4K mouse, it just feels more responsive.
You can go as fast as you can without trying to go on. Hey guys, welcome back to another audio review. Today we're looking at the Hidizs MS3. So big thanks to Hidizs for sending the MS3 out for review, and without further ado, let's jump into this one quickly. So moving straight into the details, features and unboxing. The MS3 comes inside a black Hidizs box, of which you are greeted by the IEMs upon opening, and those would be inside these slots, but I've already taken them out. So further inside, there are 3 types of ear tips in 3 different sizes, as well as 2 additional tuning modules which you can swap on and off for different sound signatures. They just screw on to the nozzle on the IEM. Then again, further inside is where you would find the leather carrying pouch, which would also contain the cable. That would be in here. But I've also taken the cable out. So speaking of the cable, this is the stock cable. And it actually feels surprisingly nice, so you probably wouldn't need to make any cable changes on this IEM. Though, there is also an upgraded cable version available for purchase with the IEM. So the MS3 retails for $170 US with this standard cable, or $204 US with their upgraded version, which for us here in Australia is approximately $260 or $310 AUD. However, it is 30% off the prices I just mentioned at the time of recording this video. Going straight into the sonic features. We can start with the ear tips and the tuning modules. So the 3 ear tips do exactly as they mentioned, being vocal-centric, balanced, or bass-centric when compared to each other. Between the modules, the rose gold is the balanced module and definitely sounds so when compared to the other 2, so the rose gold one is the stock module that comes on the IEM. The silver module slightly reduces the low end while boosting the treble a bit when compared to the rose gold module, and to me, this was too much. Even though it was only a slight tweak on both ends, the combined effects make the IEM sound like it is missing too much bass and mids while the treble becomes a bit too fatiguing. Now similarly, the bass module elevates the low end way too much and removes the mids and upper mids, which was already missing. Now the MS3 overall has surprisingly good bass, with acceptable, albeit elevated treble. Now, I expected the treble to be a lot more fatiguing and piercing, but that wasn't the case, at least on the rose gold module. However, the mids are heavily lacking, and overall the IEM really struggles when it comes to things that involve natural and organic sounds. Now, both the silver and red modules only make the IEM worse in my experience, so I've been sticking to the rose gold module. And I have been using the bass ear tips because the added low end and warmth help fill the mids in a little bit, but it still isn't perfectly ideal. For the rest of the review, my thoughts are based on using the bass ear tips and the rose gold modules. Now talking about bass, which is the best tonal part about this IEM. Both the sub bass and mid bass on the MS3 actually hit surprisingly well with good tactility and rumble. Now this is by no means a bassy IEM or an IEM for bass heads, but both the quality and quantity of the bass is quite good across the spectrum. Now I don't really have much more to comment here because the overall experience is still somewhat hindered by the mids and treble section, which we'll talk about next. But for both EDM and modern pop, the bass is quite good, and I wouldn't really have any problems recommending the MS3 for electronic genres such as melodic dubstep, because those do not rely on mids and treble as much. Now mids are the weakest point on the MS3. It makes me really hesitant to give it positive feedback because I can't. There's a big dip in the mids compared to the rest of the frequency spectrum, and unlike usual Chi-Fi tunings, the problem isn't in the low end. So with how Chi-Fi IEMs love to be tuned, there is usually a big dip in the mid-bass, lower mids transition phase. The rest of the mids and the upper mids are usually elevated in the Chi-Fi tunings. However, in the case of the MS3, it's a little bit of the opposite. Now I don't feel like the MS3 is missing mid-bass or that lower mid section, but the mid spectrum is really off the rest of it. The timbre of instruments, vocals, is just completely missing. In the case of instruments, especially instruments used in orchestral arrangements, they just sound completely unnatural. And yes, sure, I can still tell a violin's a violin, a cello's a cello, a piano's a piano, and so on, but they don't sound quite right. Like, I'm sure gamers out there on gaming headphones can also tell a piano is a piano when they're using their gaming headphones, but you would know that in person, that instrument does not sound like what you're hearing through your headphones. Now, vocal timbre is also off too, and it sounds heavily recessed. The mids is just or around something I cannot accept, right? However, the part about mids is less relevant when it comes to sounds that aren't natural or real to begin with, which is why I'm alright with it for EDM, because those are genres that often involve a lot of artificially produced electronic sounds, and these sounds barely have any correctness or timbre to mention, so it isn't affected as much. Now, treble on the MS3 is surprisingly decent. I expected it to be a lot more fatiguing than it actually was, but when the volume is turned up, it can still get a bit sharp. Now, volume is an important fact to talk about here, because you may subconsciously turn the volume up to hear the mids better, and in some cases, that is when the treble will start bothering you. At normal volumes, the treble doesn't sound like it's wonky or has any particularly large peaks despite showing so on the graphs. The treble actually extends surprisingly well and has sparkle. However, naturalism is once again slightly lacking in this department, which affects harmonics and timbre a little. It makes things sound a bit too metallic in some cases. Now for some listeners, or genres, or instruments, this might be a benefit, while others it might not be. For example, if you want that metallic sound to your metal genres, then by all means. But at the same time, I found acoustic guitars, for example, can sound a bit too metallic on the string plucks, or even piano notes can sound a bit too metallic and clear. This type of elevation and boost, however, is often a way to raise the technical departments of the IEM, which we can also talk about now. So resolution and separation on the MS3 is fantastic and well exceeded my expectations. Many nuances and details do pop out, especially smaller background sounds that you might not usually hear. There really isn't much for me to say here. The rest of the technicalities on the MS3 is also good, but not particularly standout. So staging is just about what you would expect for an IEM at $170 US, and despite the good resolution and separation, it can still sound a little bit closed in during busy passages. Within the stage, however, imaging and positional accuracy is still fantastic. Now, one of my favorite tracks of all time now is Nautilus by Yoshika, which I have been using to test gear. It has some of the most fantastic mixing, tonal balance, and just all around great for testing all tech aspects, whether that's staging, detail retrieval, separation, staging, dynamics, whatever, right? It's worth giving it to listen and seeing how it comes out on your gear. Dynamics on the MS3 is also quite good, both in the speed and pacing of sounds. So it hits and cuts where it's supposed to, as well as the volume contrast between quiet and busy passages. Overall, I would have to say though, the techs on the MS3 are probably the biggest highlight of this IEM when compared to its rather lackluster tuning. Now, this does translate extremely well into video gaming. So listening for footsteps, pinpointing enemy positioning, separating sounds when there's a lot of things happening, I can happily recommend this for the gamers out there. So once again, thanks to Hidizs for sending out the MS3 for review. I look forward to seeing what else Hidizs can make in the future, because I believe if they were to correct their tuning and fix the mids, they would be a deadly competitor for the price brackets that their products are in. Until then, see you guys in the next video.